We're with Francesco Saina. This is also a talk about remote interpreting. It's a very hot issue nowadays, of course. We had a talk from 2 interpreters from the Israeli branch of ICE last night, and now we had one from Morris about interpretation in courts, and the next one is from Francesco Saina, and you can screen sharing is enabled, so go ahead and share your screen and start and just introduce yourself in your talk.
Yeah, thank you very much, and good morning, good evening, or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. I see that there are many international speakers and participants here today. In the meantime, I will share my screen. I hope you can see it. Please give me a thumbs up. Okay, perfect. Yes, I am a, thank you, Eliezer. I am a native Italian interpreter and translator, and the focus of my presentation, of my talk, will be remote interpreting, one of the hottest topics in our industry today. And it has also been discussed during this event, during this conference. And my presentation is based on an experimental research study that I carried out in April 2019, so actually 1 year before the pandemic outbreak. But I think that the outcome of that research can still be meaningful today to analyze the current situation, current trends, and also try and shape a post-COVID scenario, because we have seen many practices spreading over the last year, and maybe many standards haven't been met fully, at least. So I think that this research can still be meaningful and useful to our community. So the objective of my research was that of assessing the use and experience of remote simultaneous interpreting, that nowadays we all know as RSI, in a university setting. And we did so by testing a professional RSI platform, one of the leading platforms in the industry today, on the different groups of users involved, namely interpreters, speakers, and the audience. And I also want to say that today, maybe we would call this setting more a hybrid setting than a remote setting, because speakers and most of listeners, of attendees, were gathering in the same room in the conference venue at the University of International Studies in Rome, Italy, while interpreters were all located in a hub, so a room equipped with real physical booths within the same building in another floor, and they were supported by a team of technicians. So maybe we would call this situation today a hybrid interpreting setting. Around 100 people participated in the research, and we collected 66 complete and usable answers. And the interpreters were students in the final year of their master's degree in conference interpreting, with different levels of previous working experience. Speakers in the conferences were academics and invited guests, and audience members were professors and researchers at the university, and professional interpreters specifically invited to join the event, students, and non-specialized attendees, the so-called general public, we could say. And as for the methodology of the research, we carried out these tests during 2 conferences held at UNINT University in April 2019, as I said in the beginning, and which were followed by surveys we used to collect the perceptions and opinions of the groups of users on their experience of the use of the platform. We collected both quantitative data, because our surveys had 23 to 28 items, depending on the group they were addressed to, and with both closed-ended questions with either multiple choice or yes/no answers, and assessments on Likert scales ranging from 1 to 5. And we also collected qualitative data by providing blank text boxes where respondents could share their opinions, comments, or further remarks. Before the actual tests, we also carried out a pilot test where we administered the survey and we conducted interviews with focus groups to validate the survey according to best practices in survey research. Then we converted and entered the answers into a specific digital database in order to ensure anonymity of the answers, and we calculated mean values for the answers that we collected. So I would directly jump to the findings and the results since our time is limited. And these are the findings collected from the answers of the interpreters participating in the tests. And their assessment, their judgment on audio and video quality was generally positive, as most of the answers deemed the quality of video and audio as sufficient or good. And in this case, it is important to say that video and audio quality were provided by the technicians, on-site technicians, and that collected the signal coming from microphones and cameras at the university and converted the signal, the feed, into a digital signal for the platform. Now, we used the research was based on 2 conferences, and these are the overall results for the 2 conferences. But a remarkable outcome is that during the second conference, the video quality was deemed as higher. That's because in the first event, interpreters were provided with a general overview of the floor where all the panelists were speaking. While in the second conference, the video feed focused on the speaker who was currently giving their presentation, and therefore interpreters could catch their lip movements, gestures, and facial expressions. And this is another element that was also mentioned in the previous presentation. And this can be useful when we try to shape a post-COVID scenario, because today we are all used to speakers who connect from their home and therefore use their own laptops with built-in cameras, and we are used to having a closer view at the speaker. But when we hopefully come back to traditional events, on-site events, or at least hybrid events, event planners and event organizers need to ensure that proper and high definition video is provided to the interpreters, because that has a major impact on the quality of their performance. Therefore, there are other elements that I want to underline. The interpreters participating in the survey did not experience any significant increased mental or physical fatigue or distraction. But there are many reasons for this. The first reason is that the interpreters participating were students or young graduates, and they are somewhat used to practicing with videos or other media, and therefore they're used to some kind of setting which is pretty similar to remote settings. But above all, they didn't experience such increased fatigue or distraction because they were co-located with their booth partners, with their teammates. Therefore, they didn't need, for example, a second channel to communicate with them, but they could talk to them directly. And then they could also count on a team of technicians at their disposal to fix any technical glitches, something that nowadays is not possible because the interpreters need to juggle between the linguistic tasks and also the technical aspect of the platforms of the event. Therefore, these conditions need to be ensured, to be granted, and these standards need to be met in order to have the results that we can see in this research, where almost 80% of the participating interpreters said that the quality of their performance could be compared to the ones in traditional, we could say, working conditions. Then there are some additional features of the platforms that could be commented. For example, almost no interpreter used the event chat built in within the platform. That is because back then the platform didn't only had a general chat for the whole event. So it didn't offer any private chat for interpreters or for booth partners. And therefore interpreters decided not to use it because anyone could see their messages. And this could be a useful suggestion for the developers of these platforms, because they should take this into consideration. Another important aspect in my opinion is that already back then, 1 year before COVID, more than half of the interpreters participating thought that specific training for remote interpreting is needed at a university level. And this is really important because now I believe that we could all agree that now that percentage could be even higher. But nowadays, only associations, private companies, or individuals are providing training for remote interpreting. So universities and training institutions need to close that gap and include remote interpreting as a modality in their programs. And the final element is familiarization with the platform, because the interpreters participating in the different tests were different. There was only a small group of 6 interpreters who took part in both in all the event, in both conferences, and they already experienced a better performance with the increase of their familiarization with the platform and with the practice of remote interpreting. Therefore, now that we've all been exposed to this kind of working conditions for more than 1 year, this percentage and these values, this scores could be even higher. Now let's move to rapidly move to the results collected from audience members. And they also didn't experience any significant increased stress or distraction, or didn't perceive the platform as an obstacle to the interpreting service, because they simply had to use their devices, such as their mobile phones or tablets, to listen to the interpretation. So their experience was similar to the one they have when they use traditional receiving devices. However, there were a few elements that were both highlighted as pros and cons. For example, the use of personal devices. Some of the participants considered it positive because, for example, they didn't have to leave their IDs when they collected their receiving devices, and so the use was more immediate. On the other hand, some of them ran out of charge on their smartphones by the end of the event. Then also the availability of audio feed after leaving the app was considered as a positive element, because users could use their devices for other reasons, for other uses. But at the same time, others considered this distracting. They were tempted to use their phones for other reasons. And finally, the possibility to follow the event from a distant location, because as I said in the beginning, most of the audience was located in the same room as the speakers, but some listeners were connecting from home or from another location. And some of them were happy to be able to follow an event they couldn't attend otherwise, while others experienced distraction while connecting from home and having many things to do at the same time. And I think that in this moment, we can all relate to that. And then finally, coming to speakers, they basically had a listening experience, an experience as listeners, because again, on-site technicians were taking care of all the technical aspects. They prepared the laptops, the computers that captured their audio and their video. And so they didn't have to think about anything. They only had to perform their speaking task, and they didn't experience any stress or distraction or hindrance to their performance. And this is, again, another element that needs to be taken into consideration by both event planners, because if there is a specific technical team taking care of all these aspects, everyone, interpreters and speakers, can give their best in their performances. And at the same time, in interpreters and translators associations like yours are expected to set guidelines for both for interpreters and for event organizers, because there is a line that cannot be crossed in order to ensure the best quality on our side as interpreters. Therefore, coming to the conclusion of my research, overall, it was a satisfactory experience, provided that all the above conditions and standards are met. Interpreters in particular showed a receptive approach and openness to evolution in the profession, something that 1 year later, unfortunately, became unavoidable. But they also highlighted the need for specific preparation and availability of adequate training equipment. So universities need to provide, and training institutions in general need to provide expertise and skills to be able to face these new trends in the market. And collaborations among all the parties involved, namely interpreters associations, event planners, platform developers, institutions, is essential in order to make this profession able to continue to thrive. So my research was just a first step in a field that is still mostly unexplored. And as I said, time variation and familiarization with the platform is another aspect that needs to be investigated. And also, in my case, in the case of this experiment, as I said, interpreters were all located in the same room, in the same hub, something that especially during lockdown was impossible. And therefore, this is another aspect that should be investigated. How do interpreters communicate when they are not in the same booth or in the same place? And then we should also try and analyze the trends that developed during the period of COVID, because there are good practices, but there are also bad practices that unfortunately developed. And we need to analyze that and to fix them in order to prepare ourselves to shape better conditions for the post-COVID period. So I don't know if we still have a few minutes for any comments or questions on your side.
Yeah, there are 10 minutes before the next talk, so it can be a break.
Okay, I will still be hanging out here or here. You will have my contact details, but in the meantime, thank you very much for your attention, and please feel free to reach out if you have any comments or questions or doubts. Thank you.
Okay. So we have 10 minutes before the next talk. If you want to chat with Francesco, it's fine. And I'll be back in 10 minutes for the next one.
Yes, thank you, Francesco. And what you said yesterday, as Uri mentioned, there were two representatives from the Israel chapter of AIC, and they say, okay, there are pros and cons of remote interpreting, but it's here to stay. And you're saying actually, you're reaching to the same conclusion. It's here to stay.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, I actually carried out this research 1 year before the pandemic, and I didn't expect the pandemic to come. Yeah, of course. But somehow and when I prepared this research, most of my colleagues thought that I was too futuristic, that it would never become mainstream in our profession. But somehow
I put time.
Yeah.
The avant-garde of yeah.
Yeah, but somehow I perceived that this was going to become the next big thing in our profession, and absolutely I think that now even more it is here to stay, and therefore it is even more essential and needed that interpreters associations like ITA or like AIC set good standards and guidelines for everyone, because I think that our profession otherwise wouldn't be able to prosper if everyone is left without in unruliness, without any standards or any limits. And therefore I think that this is something that we should all work on.
I think your research was absolutely prescient. So well done, because I'm sure that all the remote interpreting that's taken place this year is just validating the strengths and weaknesses that you found. Because although we like going to conferences and traveling and meeting people face to face, it's obvious that even when things get back to normal, the whole concept of remote conferences will continue. And so what you've done is set the direction for, you know, the food for thought. How is it best going to be done? For the technical developers, what platforms do they have to develop in this whole, I don't interpret, but I know that the co-interpreters need to be talking to each other and so forth. I mean, you know, that's fairly obvious. So well done. What can I say? And a beautiful presentation too. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. Well, absolutely, remote interpreting also opens a lot of new opportunities for everyone, for event organizers. For example, today we heard over these days we listened to speakers and participants who maybe couldn't attend otherwise to these presentations. So this is also a big opportunity. But I think that research in this field, research and practice and good practice in this field are absolutely needed to keep everything under control and provide a good way a good path to follow on everyone's side. So thank you very much for your remarks.